Ladies and gentlemen, boys and girls, warshippers of all ages, welcome to YouTube. My name is SeaRaptor, and today we conclude our first look at the Dutch cruiser line as we take a spin through and try to figure out what the heck is going on with Tier 10s. I'm going to get this wrong, but I'm going to try it. Gouden Leeuw. Gouden Leeuw? I'm getting it wrong. I'm sorry, Dutch speakers. This one's weird, right? You threw us two softballs with Haarlem and Johan de Witt, and then we get to this thing, and our heads explode. So, sorry. But we're trying, okay? Anyway, guys, this is the top of the new Dutch cruiser line, and there's some things if you've watched the Tier 8 and Tier 9 videos, some things that are going to look very familiar, and there's some things you're going to go, well, that's new, and let's have a look through this as we just kind of take a spin around the ship. Now, remember, guys, I can talk all the way I want about stats all day in port, can't show you gameplay, just the way Wargaming has it set up right now, so sorry, c'est la vie. Here we go. Let's look at survivability. 51,900 hit points. This is solid, but it's not remarkable. I want to talk for a minute about Tier 10 cruisers, because almost more than any other tier in the game, there is a staggering variety of cruisers at Tier 10. The main battery of caliber guns at Tier 10 start on the low end at 127 millimeters. I'm looking at you, Colbert, running all the way up to 310 millimeters, and that is Yoshino. So there's a ridiculous variety of Tier 10 cruisers. So what I'm going to try to do with Gouden Leeuw here is try to kind of comparing her to her contemporaries that have a similar main battery. Now, there is nobody that has this main battery diameter, so there's no direct comparison. I'm going to do the best I can, okay? So, for the purposes of most of the review, we're going to talk about the Tier 10 super cruisers. Let me make sure everybody's on the same page here. Here's what I'm talking about. Yoshino, I'm going to put Henri Quatrième on this list. Gouden Leeuw here, of course. Napoli, Italian Napoli, which is still in testing. She's a premium. Goliath, Puerto Rico, Petropavlovsk, Moskva, and Stalingrad. If you're not on that list, and I'm making comparisons here, I'm not really talking about that ship. You can't compare this ship to a Worcester or a Colbert or an Austin. They're not even remotely the same. All right, so back to hit points. 51,900 hit points. As super cruisers go, this is definitely on the low end. In fact, this is the lowest of the bunch. But I think this is a balancing thing. And I'll talk about this when we go look at Gouden Leeuw's concealment here in a little bit, because she is quite stealthy for a ship with these caliber guns. So I think what Wargaming is doing here is they're trying to balance kind of her health pool with her stealth and concealment. 25% torpedo protection is about where you'd expect it to be. The range in this kind of class of ship ranges from 19% to 28%. You're right in the middle. It makes sense, right? You're pretty standard here. Okay. Armor layout. Now, if you've looked at the armor scheme, you watched the previous videos on Haarlem and Johan de Witt, then you have basically seen this armor scheme. 25 millimeter fore and stern plating. I've got a 40 millimeter strength that runs all the way to the bow. I can knock that off and see here. I've got quite a narrow citadel in the center. There's my little 25 millimeter turtleback, and so on and so forth. I can turn off the torpedo protection here, and there's my 225 millimeter belt, just like we saw down at Tier 9 at Johan de Witt. Now, there is one thing that I want to point out that I feel like might be a bit of an Achilles heel of this ship, potentially. Notice what's kind of sticking out of her citadel here, right? This forward barbette is very oddly modeled. This feels like a really strange decision by Wargaming. I can't explain this. We know for a fact the magazine doesn't just stop halfway under the turret, right? There's going to be powder and shell elevators in here. The magazine would have kept going at probably at least the forward end of the turret, if not all the way past it. When you go look at the magazines for Haarlem and Johan de Witt, the citadel space, I should say, that represents the magazine, it does extend at least to the forward edge of the barbette. But for some reason, here on Gouden Leeuw, we don't have this problem. So when you peel away, when you put her casemate back on, and the casemate is the same as it was previously as well. We got 30 millimeter deck armor, 40 millimeter casemate, okay? This forward barbette just sticks out like a sore thumb. I'm not sure this is a weakness, because this is not a ship that I think you're going to find yourself brawling with a lot. She has no torpedoes. There is no encouragement to take this ship in any closer than it absolutely has to be. So is this a weakness? I hesitate to call it that, But I might say I might consider it a design flaw that you should be aware of if you do find yourself brawling in this ship. Just kind of keep that in mind. You might find yourself in trouble. Beyond that, there's not much else remarkable about her armor scheme. It's essentially the same thing that we've seen at Tier 8 and Tier 9. Maneuverability and concealment, 33.5 knots. Pretty standard for most of these kind of super cruiser classes. You see 32 on the low end, 32.5, that's Petro. Puerto Rico's 33.5. Of course, Gouden Leeuw here is 33.5. We've got a couple of that are 34. That's Yoshino and Moskva. A couple of 35s, Henri and Stalingrad and Napoli. So there's a bit of a spread here, and we're kind of right in the middle. Not too shabby. 790 on the turning circle. That's really good. That's really good handling for a ship in this kind of throw weight and weight class, guys. Napoli is the only other ship that even kind of remotely comes close to this. Her turning circle is actually better. Henri's is actually a little worse. It's not significant. It's about 50 meters worse. So if you had to pick a ship in the game right now that this might handle like, I would probably point you to Henri. Every other ship in this kind of gun caliber class at Tier 10 is not going to handle like this. They are all crazy turning circles. This thing does not have that problem. So, at Tier 9, we talked about Johan de Witt's not really having great agility, compared to the competition. Here at Tier 10, her agility, the agility here of Leeuw might actually be a strength. So we'll keep that in mind as we go into testing. Rudder shift there, you see 12.7 seconds. Not very exciting. I mean, it is what it is. It's pretty average. It's kind of run of the middle of the road. I'm more excited about her. Speed is solid, and that turning circle feels really, really good. Now, we talked briefly earlier about her stealth. Let me translate this down for you. 13.1 base detection on the surface. That does tie Napoli for best in class, best in type for these kind of super cruiser style ships at Tier 10. When you run this number all the way down, concealment expert on the captain and concealment module and camouflage, you get a 10.3 detection on the surface. That is really nasty. That's really, you're going to surprise somebody with these guns, right? This ship has almost, guys, and I said this in Napoli's video as well, almost as good a stealth as Zhao. And Zhao for ages was like the golden child of cruiser stealth at Tier 10. And she's very nearly almost been power crept by two ships that are about to enter the game that have nearly her stealth but significantly better gun calibers. And Zhao is already in kind of a bad place, if we're honest, right? Like, I'm still hoping to do a video on why Zhao desperately needs buffs, okay? But yeah, her stealth is absolutely an asset. You need to keep that in mind if you find yourself facing off against one of these. That stealth can really surprise you, so stay frosty, okay? Main battery. This is where things get interesting. These are 3 triple turrets of 283 millimeter guns. That's right, kids. These are essentially Scharnhorst guns. Now, I'm generalizing. These are not exactly Scharnhorst barrels and everything, okay? But they're the same caliber and better dispersion. So if you've driven a Scharnhorst and you like driving Scharnhorst and you like how Scharnhorst main battery performs, you probably are going to gravitate toward this ship, and you're going to like it because that's kind of where we're going here, okay? That shell velocity, 890 meters per second, is better, if memory serves, is better than what you get out of Scharnhorst. I believe Scharnhorsts are 790 or 780, something like this. I'd have to go back and double check. Now, one thing you're not getting the same performance out of is the shell, the HE shell damage and the AP shell damage are different, but the AP shell damage here is still pretty good. Let's see, let's have a quick look at this. I mean, for 283 millimeters, you're getting 7,900 damage out of these shells. That's pretty solid. You're getting up towards very nearly what you would see out of the 12-inchers, which makes sense, right? These are 11-inch guns, so they're not Puerto Rico, they're not Yoshino, they're not Stalingrad, but they're getting close, right? Of course, Stalingrad blows everybody out of the water, but this is not shabby, not too shabby at all. The HE shell performance is pretty good as well. 20% fire chance. You see there, 47 millimeters of pen. There's a lot of battleships that are going to you're going to really piss off by firing HE at them, right? And that's kind of the hallmark of the super cruisers at this tier. You will find yourself firing HE for full pens against a wide variety of targets, and your AP will absolutely bully cruisers. And yeah, there's some interesting things to like here. Now, one of the things you're not going to like, 16.5 kilometer range. Yikes. We didn't talk about this when I did the Johan de Witt video. But Johann de Witt, and we did point this out, right? She does have access to spotter aircraft. So there is potentially more of an incentive, let's say, to take the reload mod in slot 6 than you might find here at tier 10, because we haven't touched on it yet. But Gouden Leeuw does not have aircraft facilities. There is no spotter plane for this ship. 16.5 is your range, kids. That's the range. And if you want more range, you're putting range mod in slot 6. My suspicion is that that's what most people are going to default to, and only like the most kind of hardcore, try-hardy guys will attempt anything other than that, right? Way back when I first look at Goliath, and I've talked about this on stream and off stream, like Goliath's main battery range feels bad, right? 16 and change. Napoli's the same way, right? 16 and change. This is bad. Like this is rough. The other thing I want to point out, just like we've been kind of highlighting along the way, the dispersion ellipse does not feel very good for the range you're dealing with, the caliber of shells you're throwing. That dispersion ellipse is notably larger than you want it to be. Now, she's still a cruiser. She still has a good sigma value, but the overall dispersion ellipse means that every now and then you're going to throw shells downrange and you're going to curse RNG because they're going to go someplace you didn't want them to go. But the main battery here definitely has the opportunity to be a bit of a bully. While we're talking about offensive capabilities, let's look over the airstrike, and I'll put the same graphic I've been using up to this point up again. You see there that Gouden Leeuw's airstrike, she retains the 2 available flights. She goes from 10 planes to 12, so now we're putting 72 bombs in each reticle. The bomb damage goes up to 6,800 per bomb, 38 millimeters of pen, 39% fire chance. So again, you're not going to pen a large number of battleships that you're going to come across. Are you going to pen opposing supercruisers? Are you going to pen opposing heavy cruisers? Yes. If you're driving an Alaska, if you're driving maybe not a Stalingrad or a Moskva or a Petro, but if you're driving an Alaska or a Yoshino, a Yoshino. Oh, can you imagine what this thing would do to Yoshino? These bombs would absolutely melt a Yoshino or a French battleship, a Richelieu, a Jean Bart, those kinds of things. These things will do a lot of damage to players who are used to I'm going to park my ship here and this is my bow, and lol, I'm going to throw turrets, throw shells downrange. They're in for a rude awakening when these Dutch bombs start falling on their decks. So I like where Wargaming's head is at with the concept. I like the idea of giving players another tool to dislodge stationary ships in World of Warships. I am a little concerned that this might be overkill. Lots of testing remains before I have it. I feel I can kind of, give a conclusion, in my opinion. But yeah, you can see the differences there, and that's kind of where we're at. One thing to note, that maximum range goes from 12 kilometers, we saw Johann de Witt, out to 13 kilometers here. That's noteworthy as well. It gives you more playroom, right? You can be sitting in stealth at 10 kilometers and still launch your airstrike at 13. That's kind of nice. AA defenses, pretty good things to report here. You're putting up 7 flak puffs, 1680 damage a pop at 6 kilometers. The continuous damage there you see in the outer ring, 168. That is quite solid, very comparable to some of the other ships in this kind of bracket. It's not quite as good as like Petro or Stalin, but it's better than just about everybody else. And that middle ring, goodness gracious, look at that middle ring. That is the most punishing middle ring in tier 10. Of cruiser. Like no other cruiser, light, heavy, medium, doesn't matter. No other cruiser has a middle ring as punishing as Leeuw here does with that 536 raw DPS at 3.5 kilometers. That is nasty. This thing is packing a whole lot of these 40 millimeter Bofors mounts. These things are just brutal, apparently. And you see they're a post-war AA model, so I assume they are, probably some kind of continuous firing, or I don't know. I can't tell if they're manned or not, but man, actually they do look like they have seating stations there, but brutal. Lots of DPS out of those things. Oh, and you've got the 120s are your flat guns, right? These are your long range arrow. But yeah, definitely a lot to like about her defensive, her AA bubble, and that is complemented by her consumables suite. So this consumables suite looks just like it did on Haarlem. I'm coming to the dance with a damage control party because I'm a ship in World of Warships. Standard hydro, 5 kilometer. Standard defensive fire, 40-second cool time, 40-second action time, 80-second cooldown, and the standard heal that you would get as any other tier 10 cruiser. Now I say standard. I pointed this out in Johann de Witt's video. The reload time is better. So it is the same heal in terms of how much damage you get back. This is not a British cruiser super heal, but it comes back quicker than the standard heal like you would get on, say, Hindenburg, right? Which has an 80-second reload. Leeuw's here has a 40-second reload. So she can absorb more damage in a shorter duration. That repair party will allow her to do so. So yeah, that's kind of our walk around the ship. We kind of hit all the high points. There's the major change as you move up from the 8 to the 9 to the 10 is the gun caliber. The hull form, the handling of each hull is different, but the overall protection scheme is almost identical in terms of how it's laid out, with the extremities, with that 40mm bow strake, the thick belt, the 25mm turtleback, and so on and so forth. So I think that it feels like, looking at these ships in port, the Dutch cruisers feel like they have a very comfortable progression as you go up through the high tier ships. What you're rewarded with as you move up is more firepower, bigger caliber guns, and then, of course, the improved airstrikes, which you have 2 charges of them at every step. It's just the bombs get better, the more planes in the drop, and so on and so forth. Yeah, we'll have to see how they finish up in testing. Remember, guys, this ship is still in testing. Wargaming could still change it between now and release. We'll have to see. Release for this ship is probably still 5 or 6 weeks away. They historically have not been releasing the Tier 10 ship in the same patch as they go to early access for the line. They focus their efforts on balancing and getting right let's say the 5 through 8 ships, maybe the 9, and then they save the Tier 10 ship for dead last. They spend one whole weather patch rebalancing that ship as well. Okay? Anyway, guys, hope you enjoyed our walk through the Dutch cruiser line. Appreciate you being here. Wash your hands, be safe, and I'll catch you next time.